Hello everybody, welcome to Wednesday, Rocket Lasso Live. I hope everyone is doing well. It is a Wednesday, as I said, and we're going to be tackling questions from the chat. We've got Twitch, we've got YouTube, hopefully it's streaming to both. How's the audio? I'm excited because today's a regular episode. I kind of have a rule that there's only one, I do a regular week and then a guest week. And it's just the way it laid out because of S24 that it was like guest, another guest. So it's been like almost getting on like a full month since we did a regular episode. And there's definitely a different tone between having a guest and a regular episode where we have to kind of tackle questions that are appropriate for the guest. And I can't go as deep on a specific thing. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, obviously. But I'm excited to be doing a regular episode so we can tackle some things. I know there's a couple different things I had told individual people, like, hey, hit me up again next week. So maybe some of those will pop back in. News-wise, I'm trying to think of anything terribly important. On the bonus streams, if you're supporting on Patreon, then there are bonus streams that happen. And let me pull this up. We've been continuing to work on this gem collection. And yesterday we were working on this one, which is the Trillion cut. And then we've got the emerald cut, and that's, of course, an ideal diamond. And that's a variant on the emerald cut and the table cut. And what do they call that one? I forget the name of that one. That one is a point cut. So we're slowly working our way through getting a collection of these, and those will eventually be available on Patreon. But I just want to point out that because I think they're pretty neat. It's fun putting them together. I don't know for sure, but I might also put together a collection of the different gem materials in Redshift specifically, but it could be pretty cool. And it's not easy, but it's been fun putting those together. So that's a plan. But in any case, people start getting those questions together because we need questions to tackle. As always, if you're linking to a video, call out the specific effect or time code. And no matter what the link is, if it's created by some sort of artist or studio, we have to see the name so we can give credit. Otherwise, we will not tackle the question. Anyway, let's start checking out the chat. Who do we got hanging out already? Mr. Matt Dog, Polytex, Sid, Crossfader, MW, Mick, 6 Foot Panda, welcome, Tobias, Pro Tools, Dean, Electron, Scott, Oliver, Mumphies. Oh, so many people, more people coming in every second. We got PC here, David, Jeremy, Just the Dentures, welcome. Michelangelo. How do you pronounce a name if it has a Q at the end? I'm not sure. But welcome, I'll say Rayman. Brighton. But yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Prism, welcome. Yeah, so everything's going well. We are ready to go. We are continuing to work on a plugin that's getting ready. It's been in beta for over a month now, but it's getting towards the end of that as we make additional final changes. I'm in the stage where I'm trying to put together like marketing material and then instructional stuff as well. But anyway, let's switch over to the cam. I'll close that down and let's start tackling questions. Mick has one come in. I like the title. Is it possible to create this without simming anything? So let's see what we got. What do we got here? Is that an advertisement? That is an ad. Okay. Oh, okay. So we've got a super duper close up of a burning match. Daily Dose of Internet. The Daily Dose of Internet is a compilation usually of a bunch of other videos, but this close up footage is photography at least, or video. Yeah. Do this without sim. Well, I mean, there's a million different things we could do rig-wise, but let's tackle a couple of details because it could be fun. Let's open up a new file, and we'll just work from a sphere, keeping it simple. An icosahedron, as Noseman pointed out, some pronunciation. Depending, I mean, you never want anything to be too high poly on the stream, just so everything can run close to real time. Let's say I would like to see just animation. So we've got this basic shape, and the first thing is just some standard growth from a vertex map, so let's do that. What is tweak? I don't know what tweak means. I never noticed that icon. It must be pretty new. Possibly renamed or recently added. But anyway, under selection, we should be able to find our set vertex weight, set it to 0, turn on a field, use fields inside of it. Don't use the freeze. We might bring it back in a second. That's a different form. Create a spherical field just for a starting point. And I would like the spherical field to move down here. You can see it kind of lights that bit up. Let's say no fall off, so I'll just stretch that out all the way, T for scale, and bring this as small as I can. Pretty much, yeah, as long as one point has the illumination, that should be fine. And we'd like to get some basic growth going. What I like to do so we can do it kind of mathematically accurate is I'm going to grab 2 points that are pretty much vertical. You can see the distance between them is a little over 10. So that means inside of here, when we create a freeze, I'd like the freeze to add, and it will be set to grow mode and will grow up to 10 units. And right now, if it is working, it should go pretty quick. Yep, so you see it just grows very, very quickly over the entire surface. If we want to slow that down, we have multiple, well, pretty much we only have one option. That's dropping the effect strength. If I drop it to 10%, it'll be 1/10 of the speed. Something I like doing for a little bit of smoothness overall would be maybe doubling this number. So it's actually spreading out 2 layers thick. But now that's double the radius. I'll drop the effect strength to half that amount. And then you see it's a smoother fall off as it goes, but it's more slowly growing. We'll need a few extra frames, so I'll jump that to 222, and let's let that continue growing. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good growth there, especially compared to the reference. Maybe a little bit longer on the timeline. So yeah, that's working fine. So that gives us a basis in which to begin manipulating other things. We can use that vertex map to drive tons and tons of other things. Now, a couple different thoughts. One would be, I'm trying to think of how I want the outside skin. Let's take a look at the reference again. Yeah, you see how it's kind of burning away this outer shell. So actually, I mean, it depends. There's a lot of obviously this is a very complex material and it's sort of a volume. The most basic thing we could do is just erase out an entire shape. And there's a lot of ways we could do that. So if we just want to erase out the literal geometry, then I would do something maybe like, this is going to pop a lot. And we probably want to do it with a material, but let's just do this for fun. So this will be that's our reference sphere, so we don't need to see nor render it. So with this one thing we do, a approach here would be under, I think under MoGraph. Is it still under MoGraph menu? Yeah, PolyFX. And PolyFX is a deformer that works really, really quickly, but it does allow us to feed in different effectors. And actually, yeah, I need to drag in an effector. And the effector in this case will be a plane effector. You see it does something cool right away. What I actually want this to do is not do anything with position, but something with scale. I want to uniformly, absolutely scale it down to -1, which will scale it to nothing. In the fall off, we can feed it that vertex map. So let's go to some actually it does it. Yeah, I think we need to let it spread. So now you can see how this is now transitioning, and this will actually scale away to nothing, which is cool, and that's that's gonna be a really neat effect just in general. You can see how we'll get this growth erasing that away. But of course, these are slowly transitioning out. So something you could do if you just wanted them to disappear is remap this somehow. There's a lot of different ways. Personally, I usually reach for the curve. So with a curve, I could just crank this up all the way, and you see I've increased the contrast so much that there is no in-between scale. And now they will just, they're still based off that original thing, but they will just disappear entirely. If we had enough of a resolution, that could work. But here it's very blatant. It just boom hits it really hard. So that might not be my first thing that I reach for. I wonder how well this will work. What if actually let's hit undo and bring this back in again. So I do want that to scale down, but let's make sure that it actually does get the scale down. I'll get rid of that remapping. So now we're back to this just slowly transitioning out. If we feed this sphere into a volume, what will that do for us? I'm not sure. So let's let that play a little bit more forward and see what we can see. It's being a little bit weird. If you see that, this is the result, but the volume builder is still seeing the entire shape. That's a little strange. I'm going to attempt to put the sphere into a connect and see if that does anything. Okay, as soon as, okay, it is now treating it the way I more expected. The idea here is that this is an infinitely thin shell now, and the volume builder doesn't know what to do with an infinitely thin shell. So we can give it thickness by using the dilate and erode. So if I add in this dilate and erode, you suddenly see that there is some thickness to it, because, you know, we had like a infinitely thin sheet of paper type of thing, and now I said, okay, but inflate that infinitely thin sheet. So now we end up with an actual volume. And as the hope here is as these scale away, we can get a little bit more of a transition. There's still a bit of a pop to them. I was hoping we'd see a smoother transition, but let's try lowering our voxel size a bit. Okay, no, that's better. Yeah, so now you can see that because that underlying geometry is scaling away, that these aren't just popping out of existence. Just for clarity, if I were to put that curve back in and crank it up all the way, even with a pretty high resolution here, oop, I pushed it. I shouldn't push it all the way, but now you'll see that there's more of a pop as it goes. Pop, 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 pop. And if that's the effect you're going for, then cool. But without it now, you see that we actually get a pretty nice transition as those blend away. So we let those kind of pop, do their thing. Now we can add as much thickness to it as we want, and this will add a decent amount of slowdown. I tend not to like putting the smooth in, but if we do put a SDF smooth, and we'll have to put a very light touch on it, but we can actually get a good level where this will round everything out a decent amount. And we could inflate it a little bit extra. So if I inflate this up to 10, it's going to be a lot thicker of a surface, but that will allow for more smoothing before the whole thing gets erased away. So you can see how, because I made it thicker, look at how smooth I can drag this up, and we can actually start getting a very smoothed out edge overall. So there's a bit of a balancing act between those, and I might not have to go up to 10. I don't know how thick we want to make this, but let's just, yeah, something like that looks okay. But let's see if we're getting any kind of significant speed hit. I mean, yeah, it's already significant. I don't have my FPS up, but you can see that this is way slower. But we are getting a nice, pretty nice dissolving away effect overall. And it is random, and it is controlled by that original fall off. So I think that's kind of a cool outer shell. There's a lot of different ways we could go about doing the erasing of the shell. I mean, it's always, there's so many different approaches for everything, obviously, as we were talking about last time. I'm kind of doing this, I don't want to say overly complicated, but we're doing this polyFX version of it, but we could just move some object through it. But I do like the idea of the growth of the vertex map, because that will give us a lot of other effects. So all that is cool. I am going to turn off the smoothing and probably put the thickness not quite as thick. So we will run this on the quicker method, just so we can see this in a, you know, a faster calculation time. But keep in mind that we definitely have ways of smoothing that out. Speaking of smoothing, if we want to, of course, the smoothing deformer, put that inside, and that will really smooth out this outer surface. But you can get some pointy bits, but that would combine really nicely with the volume builder. So that would, well, we of course need the right amount of thickness, but that will round everything out a lot. But, you know, there's always a push and pull in all of these things, and everything is going to cause more slowdown. And while we're building the basic rig, I would often leave a lot of those settings off. In fact, something that's not unusual for me to do would be, we didn't make it external here. I mean, you know, we're just talking here. Let's get rid of this SDF smooth, and I will instead add, and I have found that a lot of people don't know that there are the external object versions of those. So I could create an SDF smooth here, and now it exists as an object. And dropping this into the volume builder just so it's kind of where it needs to be. And now we have an SDF smooth that has its own settings now that we could say, okay, calm down, and pull that back into reality. But now that's something that we can turn on and off externally without going inside the volume. But what I would do is, you know, some symbol like just type in XXX, XXX, just because, you know, one X, maybe there's an X somewhere, like there's a poly FX. But by typing in 2 X's or 3 or whatever you want to do, I can hit search, and I can hit XXX, and now everything that are things that I would turn on and off when it's like, okay, when it's time for render time, I can turn those on, and we'll see the smoother version, but it's going to slow us down. But now it's really easy for me to quickly turn them on and off. So it's just a technique that I do sometimes. So, okay, we got, like, this is the idea here is this is, oh yeah, I can't drag it. I wish I could drag the time, but you have to let the growth happen step by step. So we can see this is dissolving away, and pretty much all we've done so far is this outer skin bit. Honestly, there's even other ways I could think that we could do it. This entire thing, it could have just been deforming inward. Actually, we can do kind of a hybrid here, so it's kind of like we'll get both effects. Let's subdivide this thing. I guess we can go the same amount of subdivisions. So you see I've got the secondary layer inside. I would like to make that secondary layer not quite as big, but almost as big as this outer bit. And this will be a bit redundant, but I'm just trying to show you multiple techniques for doing this type of thing. So I would like to deform that inward as we go. My approach here will be, we could use a displace deformer, but instead I will use a plane effector as a deformer. And I usually immediately rename it deform. I always say deform. So plane deform. Technically, this calculates a little bit quicker. If I tell it to behave as a deformer, deform the points, it's going to look kind of crazy because it's currently pushing out on Y. We want to push in on Z. So I'll say -10. You'll see the entire thing will shrink. So -10 is a little strong, but I want it to be pretty much right about there. So there's not going to be much deformation, but there'll be a little bit. And then under fall off, we can feed that same vertex map. And now we do want to remap this because I want to see the effect on the edge. In fact, we could probably spread it out even more if we were inclined. Let's see, this one, it's looking for nearest, but we could say average. And we don't want to average it too much, but now it's averaging out those points a bit. Let's turn off that curve. And as I increase or decrease this, we can see that the points are all blurring a bit. So that should shrink it on the outside. However, yeah, that's now giving us more range, which probably means I want, I guess it's mostly about this curve now. I want that full range, but you know what, the averaging is not working quite as nicely as I wanted it to. So I will go back to nearest just because it's giving us a more intuitive remapping here. So as I pull this out, not quite all the way, we can actually see this outer bit be bulged a little bit. So as the growth happens, we will also have this inner layer that is shrinking right on the edge. And just for clarity, if I were to hide the volume builder, you can see that this is what's actually happening underneath. I'd like it to kind of remap on the outside a little bit, but I think I'd have to modify a different thing. But keep in mind, this is something else we could just do on the burning match. We could have just gone straight to this mesh. But once again, I'm intentionally going through and doing extra layers on this just because we can. And now, so that gives us this inner layer. Now we've got all these crazy bubble effects. Now we've got options. I'm trying to think of what my immediate go-to on that would be. We can be pretty messy with it, I think. And I'm actually, I wonder if we can do it with more deformation on this surface. We'd probably need more subdivisions. And I will do that. I'll do ×2. I will temporarily turn off the volume builder as well, so we can just focus on this. And now after that deformation, which is just fine, I'm going to make another one. And this one, we'll do a couple things. So we still have that vertex map. We'll deal with that in a moment. What I would like this to do is that still applying? Yeah, okay, that's still applying. What I would like this one to do is get affected by noise. So we'll create a random noise field. And that should, let's see, set that to normal. And currently it's set to Perlin noise. Why are we seeing, oh, I guess this, oh, okay, all the changes I made. There's a second sphere in there. There, okay. Now we've got this random field, which should be giving us different noises. And let's, we probably don't need it to be Perlin, but, and this doesn't give us that preview. I'd love to show some of the specifics by Pezzo or Paxo might be the ones I'm thinking of, but let me see if I can show this clearly. Yeah, so you see this one is giving me these little dots. That's kind of what I want. It's inverted from what I'm looking for, so simple enough to invert that, and then we get these little bumps pushing out. If this deformer is told to, that's all pushing in actually, so yeah, I want to push out, and that means I shouldn't have inverted it. That's fine. Don't invert, and now those will push out. So that's a cool deformation right there. We can remap or do different noises to get the correct scale that we want. Now I want a lot of them, and this isn't quite giving me as many as I'm looking for, and that this was the correct one. But I'm thinking if we do one of the Voronoi types, that's going to give us something. These are slower to calculate. these types of noise are significantly slower to calculate, but we're not doing too many samples. Yeah, so this one's giving me something a little bit more lumpy. And if we were to remap this one, adding the curve in, we could pinch those in. Yeah, now I get a couple more lumps in there, which is kind of what I was looking for. So that starts giving us those pushing out, but then we're going to deform it again, a completely separate, a completely different deformation. And this secondary one will drive through, I think, just some other, let's try just a back to a purlin noise, because you see this will give us these secondary inflations that will really bulge things outward as well. Now this is going to end up starting to look really messy, but let's just do this step by step, because we don't want these to happen all the time. We only want them to happen when the vertex map is moving over the surface. So let's do this step by step. Let's go to that first one, and I want this vertex map to essentially be a mask. So we could say, I think, multiply. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so by multiplying, that's going to essentially behave as a mask. So, it works. You know what? Because we're doing this deformation, I'm just going to delete that first one. We don't need that to be doing the extra scaling. But now we can see we get this nice scaling out of that effect, and we can drive the secondary one in the exact same way. And it does need to be a completely separate deformer, otherwise it wouldn't apply properly. We wouldn't get the double deformation. So let's see if this works all right. So yeah, these bulge out, and yeah, that's actually working quite well, where those kind of do this little secondary pop out. That's what I'm looking for. If we were inclined, we could add some animation speed to them. I don't know that that's strictly necessary, but it's doing a pretty nice effect for us overall. Now they are hitting their point very roughly. There's a couple things we could potentially do. Mainly it would be putting the under this deform, we'll just do it on one layer just so we can see it. We could put the, where does it live? Yeah, we could put a delay in there, which I think will show. Let's unclamp it. And yeah, so right now it's smoothing out, but let's put the spring on there. And we should be able to see that there's a little bit of springiness to that, so it stays alive. But it would be layering them up. They get a little bit buried. So I think this is a better use case is using the jiggle deformer. So we'll grab the jiggle. And let's see. Let's go easy on the stiffness and easy on the structure. And that just will, and very easy on the drag. So there can be potentially a little bit more life on those. Yeah, you see they stay a little bit more alive and they wiggle around a bit more. So it's just keeping them alive. That's my thought. So if this is kind of our bubbling out effect, and let's look at the reference again, because I haven't looked at that since we started. Yeah, pop, 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 pop. There's actually a lot more motion in there than I was originally thinking. So they do, the tricky part is that they do eventually freeze. So how do we get kind of a bubbling in the beginning? I'm thinking what I want is, let's go back to our original reference. Let's turn all that off. Go back to the original shape and the original vertex map. We need more of a range of the vertex map, so we'll do that. We already did that a little bit. I'm going to double this again, times 2. And because we times that by 2, let's divide this one by 2. And the hope here is that we're going to get a much larger spectrum of like a transition. You see there's a slower transition from one to the other. That's something we can map on. So now we modified that layer. Let's go back to this one. And you see this transition happens a little bit more smoothly. So here's a thought. I'm not sure if it should go first or later, but what if we just do this effect again? And you know what, I'll just make another deformer just so it's technically it's slower to calculate, but it gives us a little bit more visual control. I'm going to put this after, and this is just deforming again. Let's turn off jiggle so we can see it right away. Now you can see that there's kind of this extra layer of chaos here at the end. I'd like this random noise to have a lot of motion. So let's go pretty quick. Like, even that doesn't feel like enough. We need this to be really fast. So you see there's all this kind of crazy motion happening. Now, this could calculate first. Yeah, there we go. That's a way better boiling. So you see this is now first, and look at this really nice boiling effect that we get. But we don't want all this all the time. We want this kind of trailing behind the main effect. Wow, that's actually looking really nice. So we are currently we are currently controlling this by multiplying this vertex map on top of it. If I were to create a folder, let's select this and say, hey, I want a folder. This is now inside the folder. this end result will multiply. But this is the vertex map, and we saw that nice smooth transition. If we remap that transition back to a curve, currently this is saying like slowly fade in. But what if we say fade in and then fade back out again? So now it's kind of like that midpoint is getting the effect. It's possible I need to flip this upside down, but let's see what we get. Bubble, 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 bubble. Yeah, it's still constantly boiling. Oh, this needs to be in the folder. Okay, I was like, something should be working here. I had to put the curve into the folder so it's actually affecting that. So now you see get this bubbling effect, but it's only happening in that transition. We made a nice big wide transition, and now we're saying arc in, arc out on that transition. So we get boiling as it begins, and then they solidify. So now that that's happened, I can turn that jiggle back on, and now we can get these all kind of settling themselves out. But we get all this boiling and roiling motion in the beginning part of that. And it's pretty much exactly what I want to have happen. They do eventually freeze. This jiggle has very little in the way of stiffness. We could crank that up a bit so those don't live for too long. Or this could also be potentially driven by the same fall off, but that's fine. I like this. That is totally working for me. It's not, well, okay, it is effect. There's an effect in the beginning because we do have that very initial spherical field. I'm just going to ignore that. It'll be easy to erase out if we need to eventually, but let's just say that the burning's already begun, and then we get that boiling effect. Okay, that's working quite nicely, and that is, I feel like that's actually the most complex part that we were seeing here. Let's take a look again. As those like boil, yeah, we're getting a bunch of boiling. Now, of course, we get increase our resolution, make this way smaller. These seem quite large overall. Like we could make these a lot smaller than they currently are. But let's push this into the next stage. And I haven't saved this yet, so let's do that. Episode 13. Of course, you get access to these scene files if you're supporting on Patreon. Burning match effect. These might be a little too fat overall. They're bulging out too much. But what I would love to do to make this look, because we get really bad geometry here overall because of the double inflation. So we just feed this entire thing inside of a volume. So put that into a volume, build that, put that into a mesher, and then we end up with a final volume. This, of course, is going to significantly slow everything down. But let's just see kind of in general what we get. I don't want the mesh to be too high poly, but let's just see what the overall effect is. So yeah, now we get this boiling effect, but we get nice smooth mesh overall by controlling underneath. Now the more we decrease this voxel size, the more detailed that these shapes will be. They'll take on the individual shape of it overall. We're definitely seeing some of the sharper polygons, but that's where we can then put like one of those smooths in here. And we don't need much. We just need enough to like take off that edge of like the polygonness. Of course, you know, there's a big hit on speed when you do that. But we do now have a nice overall boiling effect for those pushing out, if we were so inclined. So, you know, putting this into a volume in the end, I think, is a nice detail. Yeah, and I mean, the motion that we're getting from this is the fun part. And I mean, there's ways we could have developed that with just noises internal to a volume builder, but instead we made a mesh. The mesh is deforming a bunch. We can see the motion in really fast real time, and then we can see how we get all that nice chaos in the beginning, and then it settles down to its new state. Now, just stylistically speaking, because we've kind of got all the elements here for this part at least, let's see how far, what other changes. I'm going to push those initial ones out further. Oh, no, wait, this one is the boiling, so that's on the edge. This one is the stalks, and then this one is the inflate. So let's turn off. Oh yeah, and we have to always turn off the jiggle. If you have the jiggle turned on, then you're not gonna be able to see the changes in the viewport as I do these types of changes. So if I push these stalks out more, we can get more spikes. And if we grab the inflate, we can figure out exactly how much we want those to inflate. So I'm thinking, what if we make the stalks skinnier? Well, we gotta be careful with that, but let's go into the fall off, grab the random field, go into the remapping. Pushing this in will make the stalks thinner. And then, yeah, the individual inflated tips there will be maybe a little more exaggerated. This changing that base geometry is just working well overall. Yeah, that's working for me. What is next? I mean, I'm not super worried. Well, the flame would have to be some sort of particle. I don't have any take on the actual fire here. I'm mostly concerned with the burning of this surface. We do get I mean, there are individual details that we could try and call out. You get like these extra little burning bulbs kind of on the edge. Those are cool looking. There's potentially a way of doing that. Not something that I'm super worried about. I wonder if we can do a couple of textures here, though, and make, we can do a little bit of redshift and try and make something that looks a little bit like this surface, is my thought. Although something... what am I trying to say? Oh, over here you can see that the inside, we've got these inner burnt areas, and that would be a really good use of something like a proximal, but we don't have that. I wonder if we could extract... Could we compare... Yeah, if we compare the original mesh to a deformed mesh, there might be an interesting process to get a vertex map from here. It is possible to... Is it possible to get a vertex map into Redshift? I don't think I've specifically ever done that. So somebody let me know if it is possible and what the node is, so that there's time for me to see that before I do it. But let's do something a little bit... I haven't specifically ever done before, but I think this will work. I will save this again, and I'm going to make this sphere editable. And then I want a copy of this sphere, and it can be outside of the surface. Okay? This needs a vertex map. I'll just steal this one. And we don't need any of its contents. Okay. If I feed in this sphere as its points, each of those points has its own little radius. And hopefully it's seeing the deformed points. Because if it is, we could go to point mode here, hide this piece of geometry, and when those points get deformed and they push away from the surface, we could possibly colorize this sphere, or this vertex map from the sphere. So let's hide that. And so in the beginning, we see the entire thing is yellow, so everything is within range. And let's see, as it's deforming, if they get out of range. It's not updating. That's... Ooh, use deformed points. Let's see if that is a thing. No, we're not seeing it yet. We don't give up yet. First of all, let's shrink this radius a bunch. See if that does anything. I'm also going to name this sphere boil, just so we can be sure that I dragged the correct one in there, which it seems that I did. Let's see if that... See, that's not coming through. We're not seeing the deformed points, but that's not necessarily a problem yet, because we need to throw this into a connect. So that goes into a connect, and then we say don't weld, and now this sphere can be fed the connect instead of the boil. There we go. We're seeing something now. So as those points move away from the surface, we are now seeing... We've got everything that is yellow is still down near the surface, and everything that is red has pushed away from the surface. And we have this straight up radius that I can control how that falls off. So that is now a vertex map that we can drive it. That is excellent. That gives us something to work from. Okay, so that is now a vertex map. That's a sphere boil. We actually do want that to be what gets the effect. I wonder if I should have done this entire rig kind of the opposite, where we have the vertex map on the sphere boil, and here's the original one that's referencing. The reason I'm doing this as a mesh and not a spherical deformer is, what if you were burning an actual match shape? It wouldn't be a perfect sphere, so we're basing it off of a mesh. Nothing here is specifically dependent on a sphere. It's just what we did for convenience sake. So if this one is referencing that sphere, let's see if we can get something from that. So Vertex, oh, turn off the connect. We might not need that anymore, and we can't trust what we're seeing there. Okay, nice. So now we're not hiding that geometry, and we're getting the same effect where it's just referencing an instance of its original that's not deformed. So that works well. So this one is just going to be, ooh, yeah, see, now that we can see it deformed, you can see that this is actually texturing it quite nicely. Okay, cool. So this one will just, again, be reference 2. So we got our sphere Boyle. That can go through the connect. That can go into the, well, potentially, I don't know if I don't think we could colorize vertex maps, and once this gets put into the volume builder, so it's not, oh yeah, how would that translate? Because you can't put a vertex map on that. Potentially we could bake it down as an alembic, but I don't know that that would accept a vertex map. So the volume builder is a bit of a, I don't know if it's a dead end, but let's just keep moving forward, because potentially we don't need the volume builder. Potentially we could just like put this into a subdivision surface. And yeah, get rid of the thongs, and now we get the blisters not blobbing together, but we might be able to maintain the texture through here. Let's just see what happens. And we can do possibly a little bit of displacement on top of that as well. So I wanted that vertex map. We've also got that outer layer of skin. Let's bring that back into the scene. So we've got this boiling. Actually, I want that bulge to, this inflate to inflate more. Nice. Actually, yeah, this one can be less, and then those boil more. No, that looks way worse. Yeah, we'll do that. Put this jiggle on. It's kind of a weird pop happening there. What am I missing? I mean, is that, maybe that is happening here? Oh, no, wait, why are these jittering like that? I must have changed something. Turn off the jiggle. Yeah, why do we, what is happening there? When did this happen? It's not the vertex map that's causing that, is it? Uh-oh. Yeah, the vertex map is doing that. Why would the vertex map make that happen? I did turn on use deform points, but we have to, otherwise we don't see it. But even with that off, it's still freaking out. Ooh, I don't know if there's some inherent feedback loop in Cinema or if that's a bug, but you can see obviously that this vertex map is introducing that crazy vibration, which isn't here when the vertex map's not there. I mean, it's a little disappointing, but we can kind of go back to what we had, which is, reversing the rig. So we can feed the connect over and see the end result from here, hopefully. We probably need deformed points. Oh, and we need to connect. Yeah, so now it's coming back through. This is not necessarily the end of the world. Let's see what we end up having to do to make that work. Because eventually we do need that sort of on the sphere. Can I... it gets a little bit weird. What if... Fon Diego is asking if it might just be a viewport bug. That doesn't feel like a viewport bug. It's very much geometry. It was going in and feeding into the jiggle and affecting the jiggle. That doesn't read as a viewport bug to me. I don't know if this is a good idea, but if we make another copy of this sphere, so we're getting a lot of like layered geometry here, and we're getting way fancier than we needed to, just for clarity for everyone. If I were to put a rigging tag, where's rigging and pose morph, I would like to take on the points of something, and I think we can just say the base pose. I would like to go to advanced and target. We can probably say the connect. Yeah, and now you see that this new piece of geometry has completely taken on the attributes of this connect. And hopefully I can put that animate, and let's see if it actually comes through. Yeah, there's a thing. Oh, you have to go into basic and put that there. I thought there was a way that I figured out what I was doing wrong there. Because if I say animate, you see it's not refreshing, but if we go to edit mode, it is refreshing. I thought there was something to fix. But you know what? Like, if it's working, I thought it had to do with the expression here, but that didn't seem to fix it. So I'll leave it on edit mode. Leave it on edit mode. So now you can see I've got a completely unrelated piece of geometry that's taking on the attributes of that piece of geometry. But I'm pretty sure we could put a copy of this vertex map on that now, and we'll just have this vertex map reference this one. So this will just be ref2, and this vertex map is using fields, but we'll just say, okay, yeah, but you take on the properties of that one. And I want it to not be nearest, but literally the same index. And now you can see that we have an object that's not jittering, but we did get the vertex map transferred onto it. That's a significant workaround, but vertex maps make it so that we can do that type of thing. So this is the actual one that's doing the driving, and we'll use that to do remapping as we need to. So this is actually the piece of geometry that we can put in a subdivision surface, and hopefully the vertex map colorizing will filter through into there, and we don't have all that jittering happening. So we get, we're losing a couple frames per second, but we've got, okay, some really nice overall boiling effect. So let us attempt to, well, let's get the skin turned on, if whichever version of the skin we want to keep. So let's try turning all of that back on again. Let's not worry about the smoothing for a moment. And we might need to do like a little bit of inflating or something. Let's temporarily throw a material on there just so we can see the difference. Yeah, you see these start escaping the edge a little bit. So we need to do some remapping of the poly effects, which is taking in the overall effect. So currently this is being fed, the poly effects is being fed this plane. I'm gonna put the plane inside the poly effect so I know that those are related. And let's put a curve on that and drag to remap, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So if I pull this to the right, you can see it's starting to travel upward. So I just want that on the edge a little bit more. And the sphere, potentially, I could just inflate it a little bit extra. Yeah, let's just scale it up a bit. So hopefully that can kind of be the shell, and that burns away. And after it comes all the boiling. So, lots of ways we could approach this rig, but let's attempt to do some material stuff on here. So save that, save as another version. So this will be B_RS for redshift. And let's see if we can get vertex maps or anything to go. So let's open up our redshift render view. Let me know if we start dropping any frames or anything. And there's always a chance. Well, actually, I did have a build of Redshift that was really unstable, but the newer one I've been using, I haven't had any crashes in a long time. Okay, so let's get some basic lighting going. So spotlight, I like adding in a target tag onto a null, just so it's targeting the center point. And let's see, it's going to be really tough to, let me just place these lights and you'll see them in a moment when I move them back onto that bit of the screen. So from a top, oh, did I make a spotlight? I meant to make a area light. So let's see how small I can make this. Yeah, we'll just make it tiny so you guys can see what I'm seeing. So let's move this light, and I like to move it up a bit, and we need to make it way brighter. And we'll make a duplicate of that and move it. Let's go with a rim light. And I just want to get a little bit of color in the scene. I tend not to do that, but let's put the bit of effort. I'm going to go a little cartoony with the lighting overall. So just keep that in mind. But moving this around, oh yeah, let's get that blue going. I want that brighter. And I'll make another one. And this one, where do we need to go? Over here. And I'm going to go with a bit of a teal. Move that one up higher. And then, yeah, that's going to do those. And that's our main light there. We'll move that potentially up a little bit. And then probably just one last light, maybe underneath the entire overall setup. Just get a little bit of underlight on there. And this one, like I said, I'm going to go a little cartoony with the lighting. So turn all those on. Let's get the main light extra bright. Yeah, so we just got some lighting in there. Okay, so back to our main. We can probably get away with that being larger now. First of all, let's get this outer look overall. So save and create a. We'll do a classic redshift material. I had been trying to do a lot with it inside of the node, the material nodes, but let's just do this one here. Well, let's get some of the basics going where diffuse, yeah, I think we want lots of diffuse. We probably even I'm going to steal the color from it there. I usually, whenever I do a color picker from an image, I usually crank up the saturation just a bit and maybe even the brightness a bit, just because you probably didn't quite catch the, brightest spot. But that's just my generic go-to. This is that material. So I don't want, the reflection is fine, but it's got to be really, really rough and probably not too much of it. And honestly, there's not going to be too much more to it outside, or for the basic materials. We'll play around with it, but, and we could do displacement, but let's just do bump, stuff with bump. So we're going to need a bump map. And we could do bump blending, but we'll probably layer up a few noises. So feed the bump into the redshift overall bump channel. And let's play with noises. I mean, the max on noise always works great. It's weird that they call it max on noise and not like cinema noise or C4D noise, but let's just see. So we'll feed that into the input, and we should immediately see something. Yeah, we see something with the bump. Make that a little bit. Let's see, I don't do stuff in the redshift render viewer as far as cropping and whatnot too much, so let's try cropping in just a bit. Now, this noise needs to be larger. Is this one of those inverted ones? Maybe not. 0.1? Yeah, okay, smaller. I mean, immediately that looks pretty good, but I think it's a cinema noise, so let's do something. FBM is like noise layered on top of noise on top of noise, so those can tend to look pretty good. Yeah, that you just see how there's kind of layers of texture on that, and I like the look of that. The bump, the overall scene's pretty large. I didn't scale this down to like anywhere near a match head. We're just on the size of a sphere, so keep that in mind. The bump, actually, the bump feels like it ends up going like really, really deep. So I don't know how far we can push, but just for the way that looks, this is not seeming unreasonable. I wonder if there is actually a bit of shine to it, and it's just the roughness that's going to, yeah, I think some shine. It is relatively shiny, but it's very bumpy, and the bump is what breaks it up. But those highlights are definitely something that the reference seems to have a bit of. And we could colorize. I mean, we're just, I don't want to spend too long, but you can see we've got something going there. And with the noise, we could colorize like the pits a bit, making it darker by feeding that through. Let's see, I want to just feed that. This would be the same noise. Let's feed that through to the surface directly so I can see what we've got. So like right there, hit undo. The pits individually don't jump out. I was going to darken individual bits, but you know what? That's fine. Let's just leave that as our outer layer. And let's try and figure out the other material. We've already got some structure here. So let's just call this match head. And this can be the burn. So we've got the burn, apply the burn to... Here's something I'm going to do. I'm going to, because we want to do vertex map stuff, I'm going to apply the material directly on the sphere, and then later we'll see if it filters up through the subdivision surface, and if we can apply the material after. Now, we'll potentially get back to the bump, but let's just turn that off for now. The basic color is going, well, we're going to ramp it, but let's just do the step by step. So just so we get some visual clarity, I'll jump that to kind of the color so you can see the difference between the two. Vertex map. Let's just search for the word vertex. Is it vertex attribute? There's C4D vertex map. That seems like what it might be. So vertex map, drag in vertex map. Feed this out to the surface color. Yeah, that looks like it. That was simple enough. So that needs to be fed through a ramp. Search for the word ramp. This is the input. That'll be the output. And I would like to color, I'm going to attempt to color pick the colors from it, but there's so much like light interference because the light's blowing out on it. I'm going to reinterpret it here to be brighter, more saturated, and more yellow. And then the burn area, again, it's through a lot of like volume light. So I'll get us in the ballpark by color picking, but then like really darkening that up. Now that's backwards, so we'll invert. And we can do a lot of remapping. There's multiple ways we can do remapping here. We can do it through the ramp, but we shouldn't compensate too much on the ramp if we can do it through the vertex map. Hitting save, and in our vertex map, this radius is a major variable. So let me, yeah, you see as I pull it back, that's erasing those out, and we can increase it and get more of a gradient. But, and then I'll pull the reference back on just if you haven't seen it in a while. So you can see that pretty much it's really dark on the base, and then everything above is lightened. But I think that a lot of our surface is pushed off, so we'll just have to interpret it as we want to. Not doing inside the material, I just think is going to be handy overall. So let's attempt to create a curve here, and by remapping the vertex map, let's see, I wanted the opposite. So we'll pull this, and you see the darks will become really dark. And then we can have the light areas get a little bit lighter, and there's not that much of a transition. And I controlled this through the object manager and not the material. So, you know, hopefully if we want to tweak that, we don't have to go into the material if we don't want to. So anyway, this becomes the color channel. And those don't seem to be really emitting light so much, or maybe after they're done burning, I'm not sure. They don't seem to emit light themselves. So that will just be fed into the diffuse color channel, and that can be output. And then we want the bump back. We'll probably change that a bit, but let's bring in the bump, which is going to mess that up. And now let's see what we want. That's the color. We could add more roughness to make those a little bit more kind of flat. And the reflection, where you know, just kind of a lot of light comes from reflection, but they're looking a little flat to me. Just for a quick check, yeah, we can pull those back. They definitely seem a little more light and fluffy in it. But the first thing I want to check before we go any further is, does the subdivision surface handle that? Yeah, okay, cool. Like, we can just apply it. If we put the material up here, does it still handle it? Yes, it does. Okay, nice. It's just good to know that that is possible. Okay, the surface of those seem a lot more subtle, where I think the bump will drop to 1. The noise can be, yeah, that noise is actually pretty small already. But there does seem to be like a flatness to it, where, see that these don't feel very shaded overall. Where, like here, we can definitely feel some shading on the match head, but here it feels very uniform, almost like there's a lot of, what would be the best approach here? I mean, I don't want to do illumination. We could do subsurface scattering, which potentially that is what is happening. The Use a vertex map to mask the reflectivity. That's probably a pretty good idea there, Chop. Let's take a look. I'll make another ramp, and let's feed that through. And let's make the mask that we want. So this will go from black to white. And, oh, looks like I modified the wrong one. So we'll put that one there, and this will be the new one. And yeah, so we want these to be reflective, and then that black part is not. It just kind of absorbs the light. So I think we could just put this into the reflection weight. Yeah, I think reflection weight. And let's output the final. Yeah, now the black is like super duper dark, and we can make the, you know, it can be black, but it can also have some reflection to it if we wanted. So that's a thing. But back to making these a little bit more flat and uniform. Yeah, everybody wants SSS on it, so we'll give that a go. Hitting save. I don't have a good intuition for the way subsurface scattering works, but let's attempt to... We need some scatter scale, right? So that gets fed in. And let's see, yeah, immediately... that looks pretty good. Is it transmittance color? Like, can we put a mask in there? What would happen? I'm gonna put that to black. Yeah, the entire thing becomes black. So we might be able to drive this transmittance color. Ooh, why did we just lost all of our displacement. Okay, give me a second. Is it still in the viewport? Yeah, it's still there. Okay, that was weird. Burn. Get this back over. Whoop. Let's get that vertex map. It might literally be the same mask. Let's try using the same mask. So that would be the, where is it? Subsurface transmittance. Did that work? It's hard to tell. I'm gonna make another duplicate of the ramp. That's our good one. Here's our copy. You control the transmittance. None. Invert just in case. No. Huh. Is that not... what would be the way I'd mask it? So that the transmittance isn't happening down in the lower section. Because currently I'm taking over the transmittance. I mean, it could be the... You can't feed these into the absorption scale or anything like that, right? I think it has to go into the color. I'm just curious if it is possible, because that would go a long way. If we did scatter scale, is that allowed to be driven? Because that should be outputting from 0 to 1. Doesn't really... Yeah, it just might make it an absolute value. Roughness but inverted. I see what you're saying, maybe there. Yeah, so those, the bottom would be shiny but the top wouldn't. But that's back to the transmittance. What is there a better way of driving this? Because we are getting like those flatter illuminated things. Those look better. They're not like spot on. But obviously we're getting a bunch of subsurface in these other areas. And is there a way of masking that out? Because I got to say, it's looking a little flat to me because they're not getting to the darkness because of all these subsurface. A multi-SSS? Well, Carlos, I haven't used the multi-SSS. I'm not saying I don't know how the mask works on these. So that'd be a dangerous thing to do. I don't know, maybe... I shouldn't go any deeper on that because it's just not an area I'm a super expert in, and it's not good to just wait for the chat to be like, oh wait, do this thing, because I haven't done like variable SSS anywhere. So maybe we'll just leave that bit of that there for now. Now a question immediately comes to mind of, can we get any kind of that burn effect going? Can we do a volume of redshift? You can do volume lights in redshift, right? I'm pretty sure you can. Let's turn off the crop and see if I can completely fake my way through getting some volume lights going. Not a regular cinema light. Let's create a redshift. I guess the best way to visualize it will be a spotlight. So if we make a redshift spotlight, and where is it aiming? Oh, okay, it is aiming there. But we want to see a volume of it. So first of all, there's a volume setting. So I want to say the contribution scale goes up to 100. And then under objects, I think we need a redshift environment. Hey, there it is. That was simple. Okay. So can we change this light type to like an omni? Where is it? I thought you could change the light types between each other. Oh yeah, spot. So we could do a, let's say, point. Do we get a, okay, well, it's super duper exploding. Of course, you don't have a lot of control over the, like the fall off. Yeah, you see it's just going to be kind of blowing itself out. But, you know, that is kind of what the reference was doing as well. So we do something like that. And then if it had the, well, let's just give it a little bit of warmth. That might be too much, but I imagine as soon as that disappears behind the mesh, it's just going to like disappear, and yeah, it's going to wink out. So how would I go about this? Because in cinema, in vanilla cinema, you could actually fake this type of thing like really easily. But is there such a thing as like a non-illumination light? Yeah, we could turn off it affecting individual layers, but I just kind of like, I just want to put a big glow, a big volume glow in the scene that's not being affected by geometry, but I don't think that's a thing. Oh, maybe it is. If I turn off the shadow and I move it inside, is it still there? Yeah, okay, cool. I figured that out. So if I were to move this to some lower location, that's kind of neat. And let's see, what's the best way to go about this? I mean, we could clone several. We could illuminate them. We could just have the one that we animate like up and down. And then honestly, this material does need illumination, because as it burns up, I think it would turn like bright. It would turn white. So there's several ways we can go about that. Let's see. Let's do this step by step. Here's a vertex map. It is just called vertex map. And let's see if I can create a second one. I'll just call this one glow. And glow, should we derive glow from this one? So we could do that. Let's just worry about our vertex map for a moment. So I think that we are currently seeing this vertex map, and then I want the inverse of it. So I will say invert. And yeah, we are seeing that. So those will be the bits that glow. That's good. And then I want them to, can we do it based off the same burn? That would be interesting if we can. If we go back to that original one, and now you see, yeah, now we see we get this overall. Okay, that's working better than I thought it would. If we make a folder, and get out of there, invert. It's not letting me take out the invert. There we go. vertex map, go into the folder. Now I want my external curve. I can pull the red down like that. And then that goes into the folder, and we say multiply. Now we only get those bright glows down here. This one can also get slightly remapped. So I'll make another curve. We're going to err on that being extra bright. So yeah, those can be really bright, and then they'll fade out. And maybe we should be, oopsie, undo, undo, undo. Let's actually drag the correct curve down. Brighter. And then this one, we'll leave the contrast up there and pull this one up. So it's going to be pretty heavy contrast. Okay, so that's a completely separate vertex map, and that one will get renamed. Oh, I already called it glow. Cool. So now inside of our burn, I guess it won't fade away, but let's just not worry about that. Now we can drag in another vertex map. This one will be glow, and feed that probably into a ramp. Feed that into overall emission, and oh, turn on the renderer. I was like, I feel like we should be seeing something. Okay, now the renderer's turned on. I'm still not seeing anything. Invert. Glow. Emission. Oh, the material overall. Yeah, you need some emission weight. There we go. Invert. There we go. So that's now illuminated down there. And we can control, let's see, let's give it some color. Ooh, nice. Then we might be able to get the glow from the surface, honestly, instead of this environment light, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So now that's just our glow. I would like it to have a lot of, if we make the, something I've always liked doing in cinema in general, and I think we can do it here, is if we ramp the color like a lot, we can do this bright point. Maybe we can even go over here, go and make it a little bit more red and saturated. Yeah, give it a little bit more of a glow so that can really blow out. And then just keep on cranking up the emission like really, really bright. And yeah, really get some illumination from those. That's not looking too bad. And then if we do some redshift effects, we can get some glows from that, and that might go a long way for us. But we can always turn it back on our environment as well. So with that all doing its thing, what is next? Well, we turn on our subsurface. Yeah, that rounds that out. We still get those nice dark areas. The subsurface scattering is still not letting those areas be as dark as I want them to. I'm going to attempt to turn off. Let's turn off the subsurface for a moment. Yeah, that gets dark now, and the glow will bring in the illuminated white part. I know we're getting less of that in between, but let's get the nice bright glow because it looks cool. And we can always remap that. We can remap these with this vertex map here as much as we want to. As in, that's how much that goes up there. I can pull this back more. Yeah, that will push up, or we can do the opposite and say, no, let's chill it out a bit. And yeah, we get some more of our original elements like that before the glow gets there. So, okay, that's not unreasonable. Let's attempt. Let's see what our redshift post effects can give us. Are they already here? Oh, let's go to redshift. Oh yeah, we've got our new like basic settings. Because we're on a stream, I'm going to put them on low. But now that they're, should we do some GI? I mean, it will add in, let's just do double brute force. There's not really much in the scene, so I'll just do 2 bounces. So a little bit of light can bounce onto itself, hopefully. Globals, the basic, where's the basic sampling now? It got rearranged a bit. Yeah, I'm too used to the old system. is just the progressive passes. And the threshold's like a really important variable. But anyway, let's go to redshift post effects. And bloom. Bloom's a good one. So let's decrease our threshold. Nice. Get that nice bright glow. The softness. And as I make it less soft, you see we're going to get that overall kind of blowout. And if let's go take a peek at the reference. Yeah, so we get the glow and all the extra little fumey stuff. Everybody's... What, have I not saved? I've been occasionally hitting save, but yeah, I just hit save again. So, but thanks for the reminder. Then you've always got like things like flare. Let's turn off bloom for a moment and turn on flare. Just see if that gives us anything interesting. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, that's a lens flare. Or a streak that I was thinking of. I do like the streak stuff, but yeah, that gives you these kind of secondary glows. But I don't think that's super applicable to what we're doing there. So we'll just leave bloom. That'll kind of do it for us. Like I said, we could turn that volume back on, and it's going to give us like this other light illuminating everything. But we can't really control the fall offs in a very super duper specific way. So let's just leave it with the current glow. And I guess at this point, I'm just curious how it ends up rendering, and we should probably tackle another question because we've been on this one for over an hour. So that one's saved. We'll turn this off. Let's set this up for a quick render. Output, let's do 1080 by 1080. Lock the ratio, divide by 2. So it's a half Instagram type of thing. We're not doing anything to fade it out, so it's just going to glow really bright and just be bright the whole time. So keep in mind, we're not letting it burn out. But let's rewind all the way. And it should be nice and calm. We just got that little glowy bit on the bottom, like I said, which is not something we're going to worry about fixing. Is there any easy way to... Because we want the feedback loop. Like I said, we'll just not worry about that. It's already burning a little bit in the beginning. Save. Let's not save it. Maybe I'll render out later and save it, but save and create a volume noise and put it in the environment. An environment noise shader. Oh, that's cool. If there is an environment noise shader, that sounds like something cool to play with in the future. It's not something I know anything about, so I'd have to be learning it from scratch. And during a live stream, it's not a good time to be learning completely from scratch. It's fine to be learning slightly new things, but anyway, let's send that to the picture viewer without a name. Let's see how quick our individual frames are. Pretty quick. So obviously some camera motion and getting this all up close, but let's just see what the overall effect looks like and see if we get anything. Do I have the sub? Yeah, it's the subdivision surface is turned on. That immediate glow in there is pretty neat. So yeah, we'll just let that go. I'll take a look at, well, start posting questions again. If you posted a question earlier and I didn't tackle it, feel free to post it again because a bunch of chat has happened since then. Chop, I haven't read it yet, but you're mentioning a quick plugin idea. I don't know what it's a little bit dangerous to say, like somebody suggests a plugin, because if it's like I go and I make a plugin, then, potentially it's like, hey, that was my idea. You took it. So it's dangerous for that kind of thing. But just out of curiosity, you're saying an object or tag that allows you to set whatever happens at the render time for any parameter. Oh, I see. So you're saying in the same way that what you're saying is it'd be cool if there was a plugin that could behave like a subdivision surface where there's one setting for the editor and one setting for the renderer. So going back to the checkbox I've been talking about, it's almost like you can imagine like a signal tag where it's like, oh, like here's not render, here is render. So yeah, it's a neat idea. It's not looking too bad. The way we didn't turn on our little boiling thing there, and that would be trivial to happen during the render, so I wish we had turned down. So I expect this to pop a little bit more. I would have liked this to like push in more. There would be a little bit more, but we kind of just ignored that part. We'd kind of talked about it earlier, but we just kind of turned it off. I think we need not quite as harsh of a transition there, so this could be a little more softly transitioning in. For how little time we spent on the match head material, it doesn't look too bad. But yeah, I would definitely like a little more separation between those two. And there's a lot of like particle stuff that's happening, I think, here. Or stuff that has to be particle, where you get like these little, well, maybe not so much. I mean, obviously there's a lot more like detail happening on the here, but I thought there might have been more flares. But you see how, like, you do, if this part is the burning part, then it very specifically is like flaring from that specific part. So yeah, there's a lot of very, very specifics, but we spent lots of time on it. Let's see, I want a decent number of frames before I hit play. It could look terrible when we hit render. Or I'm sorry, when we hit play in real time. That happens all the time when you go and you make something, it's like, oh, the stills look amazing, and then you hit play on the animation, it's like, ew. Yeah, bloom, I mean, even just in the illumination, once you start putting glows in, like, everything just looks better. Bling, bling. It's just going to be like a freaking ball of fire at the end. It's like a matchstick planet, and at the end it just turns into a star. All right, let's give it a bit of a peek. It's not bad. It's kind of got a slow motion vibe. I mean, we would want this to, I mean, obviously a match burns really, really quickly. I feel like this would have to be like 10 times as fast to get the overall effect. The boiling effect is nice. I feel like we could push it a lot further. You could do additional layers. We could subdivide it a lot more than it was subdivided. Like I said, the separation of the match head and the bottom. Boiling wise, I feel like the boiling effect could be faster, but that might just be a result of the I want to see this playback faster. Currently we are seeing it at 30 frames a second, but if you click in this drop down, if you didn't know this, you can slow it down. So we could look at a half speed at 15, and I can see we kind of get a slow motion one, but I can also jump this up to 60, so it's going to play twice as fast. And I do think it looks good at twice as fast. And then we can't go double again, but we can go up to 100. So this is like 3.5 times faster. And the faster one looks nice. Yeah, more boiling, getting some of those points on the edge. There's a lot of things we could change, but, you know, it's not too bad for, you know, for the hour we put into it. Not bad. And we don't go into Redshift too often, so, you know, that's cool as well, that we got something working relatively well in Redshift in that amount of time. But yeah, you can push and pull. And then even we had a couple dead ends where I would have liked the subsurface to have been blacker there. Actually, I think we turned the subsurface off, so this is just the glow, but it would have been good for that to be darker. And yeah, a million little things. But you know what? Not terrible overall. Yeah, Chuck, like I said, we didn't do anything to turn it off after it burned, so this will just be bright forever, where really I think it would just be like a little strip. Also, another thing, well, we're not going to like re-render this or anything. Oh, yeah, and it seems... Oh, that's just not glowed. Yeah, so I think it's yeah, a couple more frames, it's going to be like not moving anymore. What's really cool about building a rig like this is that the entire thing is still live. So turning off a bunch of those elements that we don't need. Like, let's see, we are using that, but we didn't end up using those, so that can go away. And we are using this, but we didn't turn on the smoothing and whatnot. But anyway, my point being is save, and I'll save another version. And I'll stop the render because it's now not moving. And well, we'll pull it back up at the end. All I was going to say is if we hide, turn off a bunch of the things that we're doing, we can always go back to that original shape. And you know, so many things that we did on this original reference. What are we seeing? The reference. That one should never be there. What is showing up here? Oh, that one. Okay, so on this original object, we still have this original, well, something's still calculating, but there, that's faster. So you can see we get this original glow slowly spreading up through it, and that's driving all the animation. We could definitely do something where it fades out again after that happens. super duper viable to do something like that. But also, we did this in a very uniform way, and there's so many things we could just go back to this original vertex map and make changes. For instance, we've got this freeze, and the freeze, something that's cool is the freeze has this radius, but the radius has its own subparameter. So if I were to make a random field and feed the random field into the radius, let's put it overall just so we can see this, the size of it, because I want to have this be relatively large. Okay, so you now see the set to normal. You see how we're getting these patterns like that? And maybe even I want to crank up the contrast a bit. So we'll put that into a curve and then pull the blacks up just a bit and pull the whites up just a bit for a little more contrast. If we take that, if we take this random field and we instead put it into the radius, that becomes a multiplier on top of the radius. So when I hit play, hopefully we'll see. Yeah, okay, actually it happened to be in the back, but do you see how it's not growing uniformly anymore? It burnt over on that side and then is spreading to these other areas. So just by changing, we could change this random seed. I could change the mapping that I have here. So like, you know, if we chill that out a little, you'll see it start spreading more. But yeah, just a little bit of noise in there. And that could even be an animated noise. And because it's adding, it will eventually, it'll still cover it. But let's give that, you know, not too fast. We'll add a little bit of speed onto there. And so now we should get, you know, see it's traveling up there faster. And that's not quite the same. So I think on that match burning effect, just that little tweak, look at how much more variation there is on everything. This filters all the way through all the other systems that we did. And let's turn that back on again. Let's turn that on, and there's our final. I think, is this not supposed to render? That is not supposed to render. That is also reference. So with, oh, and let's make that visible. So yeah, with all that turned on, I guess I should have found a better frame before I hit play, but let's just let that run a few frames and then take a look at a still and just have it being not quite so uniform along the side would be really, really nice. Let's see. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out today. As I mentioned, there were a bunch of questions earlier. So it looks like maybe Cirque has put another link in again, but I'm not going to be able to find the other questions way up there. So feel free to post again. But let's let that. Well, anyway, the point here being is you can see this creeping up in a non-uniform way, which is pretty cool. And let's just turn on redshift for a moment, and then we'll move on. Yeah, so yeah, it being not quite on the same line, that goes a really long way for that, you know, looking, you know, just a lot more varied, a lot more visually interesting. So giving that save, let's take a look at the animation one last time. And yeah, this is the sped up version, which I think looks better. And obviously having it fade out after it boils up and whatnot would go a long way. And then I have to look into that redshift noise in a volume, like environment noise, so that we could get, if you get like streaks of light shooting out, possibly you could do some sort of volumetric light and then make a version of this where there's holes in it. That would be really, really cool, actually. That'd be a good method where the light's on the inside of it, and as there is a model, and that light is only seeing that model, and that model, when it pushes out those holes, instead of pushing them out, it just makes a empty hole, and those empty holes could be where bursts of light are coming through, and they would just show up in the render. That would be really, really cool. That'd be a good way of doing that effect. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Do you have a workflow for making realistic hair with the native hair? No, I don't have a lot of experience styling the hair. Every time I've gotten to style the hair in cinema, I'm always pretty impressed with the brush tools. Like, it's pretty intuitive, but you have to be constantly rotating your camera, be like brush, 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 turn your camera, brush, 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 turn your camera. But yeah, no good intuitive. Cirque had put a link quickly, so I will check that one out. What do we got here? What do we have here? It's like cute. It's almost like balloon. Oh yeah, this is weird. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay. Oh Yeah. So like this is rendered as if they're kind of like circus balloons, but I don't think it's supposed to be literally that. It's just kind of the vibe that it gives off. This is from Fractal, and we've definitely tackled some of his work before, and it's always like great stuff. I'm not gonna go on my way to make it look super duper pretty, but let's see if we can get a couple of the basics here. Let's see, how do we make it? We'll make our squares just, first of all, for the lower poly count, and second of all, so it's not overly exactly what they had in that animation. Let's do 20 by 200 by 20 and 10 subdivisions, so you see it's very evenly subdivided. And my thought here is just a couple of animation variations on things. First of all, here's a cool trick, if you didn't know. If we put this bend inside of a cube, I can say, hey, fit the parent, which is just fine. But let's make the height be half of the height, and then we'll move it up 50, which is, you know, half of that. So you see it's the top half. If we were to bend the object here, you see it's going to bend the top. But if you set the mode to unlimited, it'll bend both sides. You can get a perfectly symmetrical bend. So that can be really fun. Turn on keep Y length so it doesn't get longer as it bends. And that will be one thing that we have. And let's see. Well, let's just start with this basic shape, because this can actually, I think this could go a long way. I'm going to copy and paste it so we have one bend that will be bent all the way. So it'll bend all the way up to 180. And I will hide the bends because I don't want to see those. Okay, so we got these two shapes right there. Now, if I make a cloner and I put them inside the cloner, I love this technique. So we put these inside the cloner, and just for now, let's only do the stick one. So it's just the stick, and I want to pile up a bunch of these. So let's go, we're in a stream, so we'll just do 6 by 6 and only be 50 apart. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. So they're just sitting there, they're doing their thing. They need to be dynamic. So we will make them dynamic. Right click and add a simulation rigid body. Turning off gravity, Control D. Dynamics, gravity 0. And then I also want these to attempt to keep their position. So let's say that they want to stay 5 by 5 and 5. So they're just kind of trying to stay where they are. Now, if I play, nothing will happen. They're dynamic, but there's no gravity. They don't go anywhere. So instead, let's say that half of them are this bent circle one. Now you see some of them are intersecting each other. So if we hit play, because that intersection is going to force them away. And what is happening? Oh, something's weird. Give me a moment. Why? These are acting like its bend isn't coming along for the ride. That's weird. Why is the bend behaving that way? It's acting as if a bend is applying multiple times. Okay, well, here's my thought. Let's put that into a connect object. When in doubt, put a connect, and let's put the dynamics on the connect object. And that fixes it, of course. I'm not entirely sure what's happening there, but it seemed like it was moving the object and not the bend. So as the object moved through the bend, it was passing through and deforming it in weird ways. But when in doubt, put into a connect object, and it always fixes it. So we need two identical hierarchies, because what we're going to do is, I shouldn't be making changes make changes at the time of 0. Anyway, in the cloner, I would like to blend between these two. So you'll see that we're starting out with a perfectly straight one, and it's going step by step and step by step all the way to a 180 curved one, which is cool. That's, you know, that's what we're intending. That only works, blend only works if you have identical hierarchies, and the hierarchies can only blend parameters that essentially have a slider. I mean, not literally like we could blend these, but it has to be numbers that are blendable. A lot of things can't blend. Anyway, so we've got this variation where there's a couple of different shapes going around. I think we should spin these around randomly, but to keep them in their square shape in the beginning, I'll do this. I want to spin each one randomly based on, well, let's not do random. We can just do a sequence. So I will add a formula. Here's a, well, here's my favorite formula. I've mentioned it before, that if you're going to memorize one formula, it should be this one. I want these to spin on H, so I'm going to say 90 degrees. So the formula is a modulo. So you just type in the word mod, bracket, ID, semicolon, 4, bracket. And I used to, and I'm not even sure if they may have changed, but I was always like, is it a colon? Is it a semicolon? What type of bracket is it? Just don't hit any modifiers. Like, you don't have to hold shift. Just type in those. But what this is now saying is, it's saying, well, this is, ID means, index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going to go all the way through. But now we're saying modulo 4, which essentially is saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Every time we get up to 4, the 4 resets back down to the first number. So that's what modulo does. So that now is spinning each one 90 degrees more than the one before. So that's all that's doing. So currently we're blending between those shapes, but this can get way more interesting if I say there's a plane effector. And the plane effector is going to override, I don't want to change the position, but what I do want to do is override the modify clone. So as soon as I drag that, you're going to see that all of them are going to turn into the circle. If I put it really low, like at 1%, you see all of them are pretty much the square. So this is now controlling where they fall on that blend. It's somewhere from 0 to 100% of the blend. So this plane is now controlling that, meaning if we feed this something like a random field, this is now remapping where and when they should be these different modes. So we'll do, I wonder if this will work actually. This could be fun. We're going to need a cloud of noise to some significant degree, but we don't want it so large that they're all like uniform. And we want some animation speed. But here's where, well, anyway, you see they've all been remapped. So if we hit play, hopefully, yeah, you see how they are now bending in and out. They're not going to get all the way curved and all the way open because a random noise, a Perlin noise doesn't go from black to white. I mean, it has a potential to, but in general, it's like light gray to dark gray. And if we can't hit these extremes, we're not going to see them. But here's what I'm thinking. What if we crank the contrast up all the way, maximum contrast? What's the best way of doing this? I mean, a bunch of these tools do it. I'm just trying to think of the cleanest one. I mean, let's use a clamp because we don't do that one too often. Let's say let's say from 50 to 50.1. So now it's essentially there's just that's kind of the opposite of what I want. Yeah, let's not do that way. There's a bunch of different ways, but essentially let's just make the curve. What we're looking for is this, where I can make another point and another point, and now pretty much we're saying it's white or it's black. Now I'm going to reset this to just be reset, so I can pull this point over until it's pretty much in the, whoa, it's really snappy. Why is it snapping? Huh, it's snapping to units of 0.1. That's strange. Why would it do that? What? It's never done that to me before. It'd be cool. I mean, if there's a way that it does that, that's neat. But why is it? Do you see how I'm snapping to the grid? Why is it doing that? What? I'm going to make another one. I want to see what's... I did say reset, but... You see if I move here, it's not snapping. If I say reset, it's still not snapping. I don't know what I did that made it start doing that. But anyway, I'm just going to crank this up. So now you see that they're pretty much circle. They're stick or they're circle. Okay? There's no in between. And the noise is still passing through, so they're going to pop, like with no transition from one to the other, one to the other. I mean, technically, there's a little bit of transition here. We can type in very specific numbers. If you didn't know either, you can say open in separate window. Oh, why did it not open in a separate window? Maybe the ones inside of fields can't. Usually you could open the separate window, but you see this is not showing anything. So that's a little frustrating. Hang on, I wiggled the screen so it minimized all my windows. Anyway, these don't have technically full contrast. I really need these lined up. And if you didn't know, you can scroll this down, select the point, and here's its information. So this is at 501. Let's put that one on 5. And this one will be at 501. So technically there's a little bit of a transition between the two, but pretty much none. So what should be happening here is they pretty much just pop from one shape to the next, one to the other, which is like, it's just a blatant pop. But I did this intentionally because I think now that we've got those popping between the colors, we can introduce a delay, and the delay is now a post effect on there, and now you see they're transitioning. This is a really, really fun technique, because what I'm saying here is, like, this is saying it's 0, it's 1, it's 0, it's 1, but then, so that means it's full power, but then by introducing this delay, that is now smoothing between the extreme values of a 0 and 1. So this was a way of making a noise go to full black and white, but not only that, because it's popping from black to white, from 0 to 1, this delay is just set to smooth, which means instead of it bending a little bit in and then a little bit out, and then one's going really slowly and one's going really fast, they're all moving the exact same speed now, because it is just 50%, and it's going to take that long to blend from one shape to the other. So it's a really good technique for a very specific type of animation that you might want. So you can see these are going to be infinitely popping and transitioning their shapes between. We could change, if I put the effect really small, you see they're going to transition between their shape really quickly. And if we make it really big, it's going to take a long time for them to transition. In fact, you see they won't even necessarily transition all the way down until they flip from a 0 to a 1. And before it gets to 1, it transitions back to 0. So you got to find your happy in between there. But those will be bouncing back and forth between them. There's also linear, which is similar. I mean, there's some sort of difference. I think one eases in and eases out, and the other is a constant motion. So that one looks a little bit mechanical, and the smooth will ease in and ease out, so they look a little smoother. And of course, you got your spring, but the spring can't, these can't overshoot because they're blending. You can't overshoot a blend. So there will be some springiness to them, but they won't overshoot. So it's going to be, you can see the C shapes are like clamp, 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 clamp. So they can't overshoot. So spring's not a great option there. So in this case, I think the smoothing is our best option. Now, these have a lot of follow position. So let's go easy on those. And actually, let's do no follow rotation. They can do their own thing rotation-wise. And I just want to see these like smack each other around. Yeah, as soon as we got rid of all that follow, you can see they start moving around a lot more. And they're just starting to go a little bit nuts. It might be a good idea to add a little bit of damping. I mean, even 55 is a pretty small number. Yeah, you can see that it'll drain the energy out when it gets a big old smack, and that they can go around and do their motion. Something to keep in mind is if they do get smacked, there's a chance that it's going to get smacked and then kind of fly through that random noise. And that random noise, they'll suddenly transform from one shape to another, to another, to another really quickly. So I think as one smacks and they move further, then another one's likely to transition really harshly. But I think this is a pretty neat looking effect overall. And what's really cool here is we've got no keyframes. We just have two different states. We've got one state where they're fully bent, one where they're straight. And then now we get all this motion from it because we're getting these really cool snaps in between. Bump, 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 bump. Changes the view, turn on a little SSAO. Boing, 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 boing. And then, yeah, if you look at the other animation, you can imagine it did something like this, but the bends could have been different. It could have been manually keyframed so they can bend in and out, and they could have been offsetting the keyframes, but I thought this would be a cool process to explain this type of thing, because I really enjoy this. And I don't get to talk about this like maximum clamp delay effect very often. It doesn't pop up too much. Bing, 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 bing. Yeah, this is actually kind of cool. It's running really quickly, so... oh, you know what I should do? I was going to say that I always leave my Cinema 4D very vanilla, because I always record tutorials and I do the live streams, and I want my interface to look as much like everybody's interface as it can. So I always work from vanilla, but there's a couple exceptions that I do that I don't think are big deals. And I'm going to show you, most people probably know this because we've talked about it for years, but I'm going to change a couple of defaults. Mostly I'm going to say I want my preset to be set to animation, except I want my deformers and cameras and lights to be there, but that's turned off a bunch of like grids and whatnot. So I wanted that to be there. And then I want to see my FPS. So I'm going to hit Alt-V, click on HUD, and I don't care about projection, and I don't care about sculpt statistics. I don't care about grid spacing, but I do very much care about FPS. So I'm going to turn on FPS, and you see that's there. And now that I've set that, and you know what, this camera, I don't ever use that camera one either, at all anyway. Now that I've turned those on, I will save this scene file, and I'm going to save the scene file. Give me a second. I'm going to make sure that I don't navigate any place I'm not supposed to be showing secrets. I'm going into program files, and then I'm going into my Maxon folder. Okay, yeah, there was nothing dangerous. So I'm in the Maxon folder. I just traveled to program files, Cinema 4D. Well, mine says R24. I don't know if the folders all say R24. I think they might have to. But anyway, right here, I'm going to save a new scene file. I'm going to just call this new.c4d right here in this master Cinema 4D folder. If I hit save, oh, it says I don't have access. I'd have to... Oh, well, okay. I have to save it somewhere else and then drag it in for permission. So just give me a second and we'll drag it in. So I'll just save this into... I'll save it into my scene files, actually. New.c4d. And now I'm going to open up... I'll pull it on the screen in a second. Let me just navigate them. New, and now I need my Cinema 4D folder. Program files. Where are you? There. Cinema 4D, R24. So yeah, okay. So now to show you, here is the Cinema 4D file. Here is the new file we just made. I'm going to drag that in here. Now it wants permissions. I'm going to say yes, continue. And that now allowed me to do it. So now what that should do is if I open up a new Cinema 4D file, so you see I'll make a cube, now hit Control N for a new scene file. This new scene file now took on those properties. So every time I open a new Cinema 4D file, those are the properties. And now you can see that it has got my hidden work plane and hidden world axis, and it's got the FPS already up there. All that will be there out of the box. Well, Rick is in the chat, and he's saying technically that should go in the preference folder, but it does work here. Rick, you guys are encouraging everybody to put it in the wrong spot if it still works there. But okay, Rick is saying put it in the preference folder, so keep that in mind, everybody. E39, the difference between that and a new startup layout is I don't know if the layout sees any of the viewport stuff. Keep in mind that you could have started that out with like a cube and some lights, and that could have anything in the scene file. I didn't do that, but it could have anything. The viewport, or when it comes to saving a layout, I thought that was mostly like which menus you have docked in which places and which buttons are in which location. Possibly it saves the viewport stuff, but I'm not certain. Anyway. Oh, Bert, let's see. Got a question for you if I still have time. Any tips on how to get natural dynamic float with rigid body dynamics? Dynamic float. Bert, do you know? I know that you're like 30 seconds behind on YouTube. When you say dynamic float, do you mean in water or through the air? NAB from a few years ago using Softbody. Yeah, it'll react to turbulence properly. Yeah, you are. I totally know what you're saying. I'm assuming you do have to do soft bodies. Okay, let me explain this to everybody. If I make a cube, and let's put this in the world with no gravity, and I will make it just dynamic. So simulation, rigid body. So it's not going anywhere. And now I will create a simulate force turbulence. We'll give it a decent amount of scale, and I'll set the strength up to 55, which is just a good default to reach for. It's kind of right in the middle range. It's about the amount of power that gravity has. So hit play, and you see how this is moving around. But you see how essentially this turbulence is like a big cloud of noise, and the cloud of noise's size is based on this scale. But you see that this is moving around very mechanically. You see it's just staying perfectly, it's not rotating. And the reason it's not rotating is that this is applying the dynamic force to the overall object, specifically its axis, or maybe it's the center of mass. I'm not sure which. So that isn't giving you any rotation. However, if I change this cube to instead be a soft body, then now all these forces are applied on each individual point. So if I hit play, now you'll see that this cube actually looks like it's rotating around in the air. So it's a very different effect. Of course, now it's a soft body. So you can do a lot of things where we give it like a lot of structure, and we can put like tons of damping, like 99, 99, damping 99, and then we give it tons of stiffness. You gotta be careful about going too high on certain numbers, but for the most part, if I were to, oh yeah, I forgot the floor hides from there. I'll have to fix that, but I do want to, oh, the floor shows up as an environment, yeah, an environment object. So if we turn gravity back on again, and we make this floor dynamic, if I hit play, that should still fall. And it should be pretty dang stiff. You see that it still behaved like a cube. There's potential for a little bit of deformation. Let's see if we can catch a couple of frames of it. Frame. Boom. Yeah, you see, okay, right there. You see there's a little bit of deformation. Now, you're asking, let's see if you did reply. 0 in the air. Yeah. So... Jaspal, I know that you keep on asking about an Us by Night something. Presumably that is a presentation that they gave. If you have a specific link, try and join the Twitch chat for putting the link in, because I don't want to go Googling for something that I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. Or potentially you could message it in Slack, but I want it to be in the live chats, not the Slack chat. But anyway, yeah, this cube it technically can get bent a little bit. Let's see if this works. I mean, one thing that you could potentially do is let's hide that original cube. And now I've got the secondary one. And you'd have to ignore those little inconsistencies. But I'm pretty sure you can just add I could, in this case, add a rigging tag. There it is. Rigging. And I want a constraint tag. So I want to transform. They changed PSR to transform. And transform, I want to lock to the position and rotation of this cube. And there might be a frame of lag on it, but you can see that that is moving now. And this won't deform. It's just going to move. Now, technically, because it's not deforming, it will look like it's ever so slightly passing through the ground, where the other one was deforming. This one's not deforming. So this is the amount that the other one deformed. This is the amount that was passing through the ground. But, it's a pretty good approximation of it. And you could always kind of expand that invisible force field around it to stop it from happening. I'm not sure, but I think that I can probably also, instead of doing this constraint tag, I could probably make this a direct child of it. But there's a good chance that will take on... This might take on its properties. This is by default set to apply tag to children. So it is also a soft body, meaning they're intersecting. But if I say don't apply the children, you see I'm not seeing the top. I am seeing the bottom. If I hit play, I think it will move with it. Yeah, you see it now does move with it. As an additional alternative, this could still be applied to tag to children. And I can apply its own tag. I can say, actually, here, you get your own simulation rigid body. And I can just say, hey, don't worry about dynamics at all. So this is now not dynamic, but that is overriding any dynamic settings that come from other tags. So now it's going to move along with it as well. Keep in mind, it's still going to pass through the ground that little bit. But if you want things to be like super duper aerodynamic, they just need to be soft body. Otherwise, it doesn't see all the geometry. Technically, I guess your alternative would be making multiple pieces. My go-to has always been a... My go-to has always been a newspaper. If you make I suppose we can stay in this scene file. If I make a newspaper, sort of, it doesn't have to be much of a newspaper. And we'll just make it a simple soft body. We'll just copy those settings over. Well, that's super. I'll put a baseline soft body. So these are now soft body, and you see it's going to be bending around, and you can see immediately that all the different points are being deformed. And if we turn on some of the really cool, and we don't use them that often because there's not that many times to use them, but using drag and lift will go a really long way for this thing to like drift through the air like pretty awesomely. You get some really nice, and we have to probably call it two-sided. Yeah, as soon as I turn it on two-sided, then this thing is really going to like waft through the air. Now the strength is too high. I kept cranking up because a little bit goes a long way. That's what I thought, but I forgot to turn on two-sided, so it wasn't seeing the backside of the normal. So this will drift around and waft through the air. There's nothing to stop you from building a more complex rig where you would make a series of individual objects to do it, but then you need to connect all of them. What's the best way? I can't think of a super quick way of doing it, but in principle, what I'm talking about is if we said this cube, if I made a cube there, and then we also made a cube here and here. Go away, plane. You're done now. If I did that, those are 4 separate cubes, and those 4 separate cubes could each get connected to each other, and now each one of them, the turbulence would only affect one of them, or it'd only affect their center point, but now they have a relationship to their neighbor, so then you could start getting the accumulated effect of it. But you'd have to build out a rig of a series of connections, and interconnecting all of these is a non-trivial thing where you have to add an entire series of dynamic connectors in between each one of various types, or possibly springs would be a good way to go. So if you want it to be fully rigid body, those are sort of your options. There's no way around that. It doesn't apply the forces in a more complex way. Let's see. Trey, what time is it? Oh yeah, we've got a couple minutes yet. A brick pattern with a Voronoi Fracture. I don't know that there's a way to get a brick pattern with Voronoi Fracture, because the closest you could get to a brick pattern with a Voronoi Fracture is the same pattern that would give you hexagons. So I don't think you could do it with a single Voronoi, but you might be able to do it with more than one. That would be my recommendation. Could you even do it with more than one? Yeah, because you do a grid, but at that point it's a grid. How? Yeah, that doesn't even make sense. That wouldn't be a great way of doing it. You want a brick pattern, and presumably, I'm assuming that the brick pattern you're talking about, you need something very specific. And everything I'm going to bring up is going to be a workaround, because essentially you can't. There is no way to get a brick pattern out of this setup. So everything that I do is going to be a modification that is a workaround. And there'd be a lot of ways of doing the workaround. So it just depends on what you're looking for. Because, let me just fully lay it out. Because if I were to make a matrix and do 10 by 10, 10 by 10 by 1, T for scale, and scale these out. Okay, so we get that type of layout and say that this is our source in the Voronoi Fracture. You're going to get squares. Okay, that's cool. And now if I take that matrix and spread it out, you're going to get, you're going to get elongated squares. So essentially we're getting bricks, but they're all stacked on top of each other. Clearly, your intent is to have alternating ones, but you can't alternate these, because the alternating pattern of this would be a honeycomb array. Let's see. Okay, it is in the correct orientation. But if I T for scale and scale these down, yeah, I was exactly correct. This is the brick pattern that we're looking for, but it creates a hexagon pattern, because Voronoi doesn't subdivide by linear, like by being on the X, Y, and Z axis. It just goes by what is the closest object. And if we just look at the pattern that emerges from here, like what is technically happening with a Voronoi subdivision is it is saying like, okay, what are the things that are closest to me? So it's like, oh, that is closest, that is closest, that is closest, and it's connecting all those. And then it's taking the halfway point. Wait, there's a thing I can, wait, what's the, I can never remember. What's the drawing tool in Cinema called? I always forget. It's, what's the drawing? How do you, Rick, if you're still here, what the heck is the name of the tool where you like can draw little like grease pencil things on it? But I can never remember what it's called, and it's really hard to search for. Doodle, that's the word. Thanks, everybody. So doodle paint, and I'm pretty sure I can draw here. So what's essentially happening is it's drawing the halfway point between there and the halfway point between there. And so you'll see if you draw the halfway point in between all of its closest points, you get this hexagon pattern. So it seems like everybody knew doodle except for me. I can never remember. I mean, grease pencil is the original. No, Sphere Factory. That's not the name for it in Blender. Grease pencil is what it's called in actual animation, in like old school pen and paper animation. So I didn't even know that the equivalent tool was called that in Blender. But anyway, the point there being is you can see the way that it's like it's making the halfway points between every line, and those connections create the hexagon. So anyway, that's the limitation here. So now getting back to the workarounds. Okay, undo. Oh, it undoes every doodle draw as well. So now that we've said that, what are ways we can go around maybe compensating? And like I said, I understand that your use case is probably going to be such that these workarounds may not be applicable to you anymore. So first thought, can I do it level by level? Not so much. And I wouldn't even do it with a Voronoi Fracture, to tell you the truth. Well, once again, I'm trying to be literal with what you're asking, but it's just not the way I do the process. Let's say I make this a height of 10. Now, we could just make a matrix where it has only no height values. So we just get those. So if this fracture now was containing a series of cubes, you can see that each one will get cut. So I could say, let's put that into a cloner. This is going to, when I go and show you the simple way I would go about actually building these, you're going to be like, why did we talk about these other ones? But you never know when these details are applicable. Anyway, you can now see that I've got 3 cubes in a row. And I can say, no, actually, let's do per step or endpoint. So I can put a couple more. And then you can see I've got these rows that way. And then if I were to say, okay, well, here is a completely secondary. I'm going to copy the entire rig a second at a time, move, one set of those cubes up. I just eyeballed, but that's not too bad. And then we take its matrix and I scoot that off to the side, the halfway amount. Now you can see that I've offset the bricks and now I do have a brick pattern overall. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. That works. And I mean, if you were inclined, you could make a Voronoi Fracture. And if you get rid of all the sources, you can actually just feed other objects into it and it'll take those individual components and turn it into a single object. So you could now treat this as a single Voronoi Fracture. It can be fed all the effectors and everything directly. That works. But I wouldn't go about doing it that way. I would, the simplest way of building a brick pattern with this type of setup would be just making a cube. I'm going to just eyeball this, but let's just make a single small-ish brick, put it into a cloner, give ourselves some height, no depth. No depth. Hello. And good, click, click, click. Oh, endpoint, always endpoint. So I can make as many of these as I want. And then, ring. Okay, there we go. And then I'll take a null and I'll say, hey, actually alternate every other one. And now if we just increase the count here, as long as I do an odd number, then you can see I can actually create a brick pattern pretty much right away just by alternating between null, brick, and now we get every other one applying. And then this entire thing could, if you needed to, put into a Voronoi Fracture. And you'll see as soon as I drop that as a child of the Voronoi Fracture, get rid of all the other sources, then now you see that these have actually gotten colorized because the Voronoi Fracture is smart enough to look at individual segments, individual like polygon groups, and make each of them their own chunk inside of the Voronoi Fracture. But as I said, I imagine that your use case is more specific, that you would need something. Oh, okay. Looks like this did work for you, so that's cool. I will save this file because it's the more straightforward way I would go about doing it. Pong house. Bring to a and simple bricks. Cool. Vespa, I think you see you made your way over to Twitch, so I will click your link. We're running out of time here, but I want to see what you got. If this is what I think it is, but it might not be. Simon does crazy stuff. Wow, look at those. So since the entire thing is this effect, I imagine this is what you're talking about. So the opening titles is from Simon Homedal. And he makes incredible things. It's very fractal, very, very, very fractal. How... I think there's a lot of... It's one of those, it's kind of like an optical illusion that when it just all comes together, it comes together. But it makes it really hard to know exactly what's going on here. Especially the way a lot of them like open up. There's a lot of really cool things happening here. Jaspel is saying it's from process. So, yeah, that sounds like, I don't know what process is, but that sounds like some sort of mathematical fractal generator is what my guess will be what that is. So it goes to how would we do something that gives this vibe in cinema? And there's so many different layers that I'm not sure how well we could do some of it. And the very fractal nature of it makes it tricky. Like immediately, I mean, first you have to start out by creating some base geometry and starting to layer it up on top of itself. Creating a big kind of weird crystalline pattern is not terribly difficult. Well, depending on what you're doing, because we could make a base structure. I'd probably be inclined to make it linear and just make a bunch of copies of a cube. I'm going to just make a cube crystal type thing. And this can then be fed a random. Yeah, the random can go a long way. For 111, 111, 111. And then, you know, so that just gives you really cool, you know, if you're thinking of these like crystals, it can be really cool. Add a little bit of random scale in there. Uniform. They don't necessarily have to be uniform, but we scale these down a bit. Uniform. Let's try non-uniform. Let's do non-absolute as well. So yeah, let these stretch. Yeah, that looks cool. It gives it more variation. Probably should do them all the same. 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So yeah, a little bit of extra variation there. And you could make a series of these and collapse them down into a singular piece of geometry. In this case, I'll just make a connect, put them all inside. So that becomes a singular piece of geometry. And then you can start layering these up via multiple copies. So, but I don't have a good intuition for what would make those look as nice as they did. I mean, first of all, it will hide the patterns better if we do give these rotations. So I could say 90, 90, 90, and it's, you know, kind of a different type of crystalline structure. But my main thought being, this is pivoting from this bottom point. If this entire thing went into another cloner, let's call this one a radial. Yeah, so there's a radial of 4. If we could do this with effectors, but let's see, which one would it be? Yeah, so something like that, you know, imagine you start layering up a lot of stuff like this. And then as these cubes kind of just intersect each other, it just kind of feels like they disappear. But you'd have to start layering this on top of itself, on top of itself, on top of itself. A little bit of variation goes a really, really long way. And how fractally could we make something like this? That's a question. So, well, and like I said, variation-wise, if I were to create a random effector there, do a little bit of, that's positional randomness, probably don't need that, but scale, not much even, let's say 0.2, 0.2, like that little bit of variation, instantly they kind of all disappear into each other. And, but could we clone, how would I... I want to make some sort of fractal structure. I'm trying to think of a simple way to do it. I might do it with hair. Hair's not the easiest thing to make lots of layers. This, I don't know if this is a good idea. This might dead end. Height of 1,000 maybe? That's still pretty short compared to these huge structure, this huge structure that we've got. And I'll just aim this upward. So that's a single helix. Let's just see what happens. I will add a hair object. So we're creating hairs. The hairs will be 1,000 long. It is on a spline vertex. Its growth is based on random, regrow. There, now they're all in random orientations. There are 28 of them. That seems reasonable-ish. Let's do... Oh, that's interesting. Why are we stuck on a count of 28? And we don't need any segments. I'm not sure why we're stuck on that, but let's just leave it as it is. 5,000 long. Okay, so something kind of like that. And then if I tell this to generate not hairs, but splines, can I then make another hair? Whoa. Oh, yeah. I should also tell these hairs to generate as guides. Can I tell this hair to grow off of this hair? Regrow. Yeah, it seems like I was able to, but can I make more? Yeah, why am I stuck to... Is it per segment? Let me add a couple segments. 5 segments as guides. Hair. Crank that up. Yeah, okay, it looks like it's 1 per point. So if I regrow, now we've got a bunch of... Now you see, the point being is I was trying to get something where it's like it's spread and spread and spread. So now we've got a series of splines. Perhaps, I don't know if this will work. I do not know. But if I make a connect, feed these all into the connect, that should hopefully be treated as a spline. I can almost guarantee it's not going to be, but you can hope, can't you? Let's say object and clone onto that. A count of 1. And yeah, you see it's not actually creating any clones because it's not being acknowledged as a spline, but we can force it to be a spline if we put it into a spline mask. So I've mentioned that before, but yeah, now it's actually acknowledged as a spline. So every single one of those is acknowledging another segment of the spline. As a simplification, let me turn off those hairs for a second. Yeah, we need to make sure that that's in alignment with the object. We're not going to be able to do the length, but we can do the alignment. So if I say transform, probably this one, 90, negative 90. Negative 90 along that spline. And let's do that now. It's probably going to be a giant mess because these aren't long enough. Really, how tall is this? This was going 38 times 50. It's a very arbitrary number, but let's fix this to all be 38 times 50-ish. Will be that helix. And yeah, it's about 2,000. So we'll put that as the length on both of these. Yeah, so that might give us a better... Yeah, those are all kind of layered on top of each other now a bit. Now, we don't have more than one in the same spot. Potentially, let's see. We do a count. Yeah, let's do a count of 3. We're starting to create a lot of stuff here. I'm going to bake down. There's probably no need, but I'm going to add a recall tag. Recall is a plugin that we make at Rocket Lasso. So if I double click that, I'm storing all the information about that so I can make it editable. So if I make that editable now, and then we can get rid of that, I'll be able to bring that all back again if I need to. And it should just run quicker now. Also, I don't think, we're probably able to do a multi-instance here. So that should make it run faster still. So now I'm creating 3 per spline. But I'm going to say that I want all of them to live in the exact same spot. So not all the exact same spot, but you see we're from 0 to 1%, we're creating 3 copies. So there should essentially be 3 crystals all layered up on top of each other. this random, I don't think it's doing anything right now, right? Or is it applied here? Yeah, it is applied here, and it's just applying a little bit of random length. That's fine. I also want to apply, with this base one, a bunch of random rotation, which is, yeah, this one. I'm going to spin them all up to 360. So that's just variation between the 3 layers that are on there. Potentially, we could even do a little bit of positional randomness so they just all spread out a bit from each other. They're pretty big, so we can do that and not have them spread out too much. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So just a little bit of layering. Okay. Having done all that, let's see if we could apply an animation random. I think is random the way to go. I could do actually based on the way they're spun, if I create a plane effector, I could say, okay, plane effector, you're affecting everything, and I want you to rotate everything on P. Oh yeah, look at that. So this is already a little bit of the vibe I'm getting from the original animation. So if I say, we can even do 180. 90 might be the better number, but let's see. If we say 90, potentially we could scale things. Potentially we could tell them to back themselves up, which is probably on Z. Does that shrink them all in? Somewhat. Let's just do this one step at a time. My thought is, but they won't fold over on each other that much, so we will need a scaling component. So let's just do the scale, even though I don't think it'll look quite as nice. So you see they've all been scaled to nothing. Into a fall off we go. These are all individual clones that are cloned onto individual different places. So if we have a spherical field, yeah. So you see that's pretty much the effect that I'm going for, except it's backwards, which is simple enough to fix. We go to remapping invert. And now, as we decrease our scale, then these outer, well, I guess what we want to do is we start in the beginning. And now as we increase our scale, you see these are going to kind of be appearing out of nowhere. And then those are like the early branch points, but we can't get to the later branch points until the other ones are, just because we're spreading out from that midpoint. So now we're going to keep going, and more layers get generated, and we can keep on kind of doing this fractal pattern out more and more and more and more. We probably want not so many. We make this look a little bit better if we make not so many original hairs. Yeah, this happened because I got rid of all these subdivisions. So 3 times 8 was why it was limited to 28. So it makes sense. So if I say none, I can say that this should have exactly 10. No, the first one, let's just make it be 5. So there will be 5. This, you see that jump to 6. So I guess it creates more than one more than it is. So I'll regrow that. And now with the secondary layer of hairs, I would like that to be, there's already a lot of them. So regrowing that. Yeah, that's a little bit more distinct looking. It would probably be better if we extended them. Actually, look here, I get to show you the effect. So here is, I want to make these original pillars longer, but look, I want to run quicker, so I killed it off, but I want to bring it back. So here's my recall tag. If I double click recall, look, it brought back the original hierarchy. It's back to being slow, but it's back. So now we can say, okay, 50 apart, but this time I want there to be 100 of them, so they're way longer. Maybe not that many. Let's go 60. 60 is fine. And let's override the recall tag. So I'm going to hold down control as I double click, and that's going to override the recall tag with these new settings. So now as I make this editable again, baking it down to be quick, I can always go back to that state again while once again being super quick. So these are now 60 times 38, meaning, let's do that, 60 times 38, which is, oh, not as much bigger as I thought they'd be, but maybe it's enough to do something. Let's increase the length of them, regrow, and yeah, that should just make them a little more distinct. We can see the individual layouts more. So now as we change the radius again, let's see, so that those will kind of appear out of nowhere. And because of the way we built it, I made 3 copies on each line. So you see that as this scales up, that those 3 all find each other and kind of merge in. So that's a lot of why I did this process, so that we can get more than one. And we're getting exactly 3 on every single one of these that are kind of layering that up. So it's like, oh, here's more branches and then more branches. And as these branches pinch in, they pinch in before the spherical fall off gets to them. So then that next, as it spreads out, the next layer will grow from the previous one. So honestly, this worked better than I thought we would. And we could keep on layering up more and more and more layers of them as we go. This is just them scaling in. There's a lot of, I also added in this rotation. This is all controlled just via this fall off. So we could say, hey, don't worry about the rotation. And now the spherical field will just be scaling them in. Of course, there's still 3. And a lot of what made that look cool was them rotating in. But yeah, now they can each scale in. As I said, the scaling has its own limitations, but hey, that is what it is. We can add more than 1 layer of the rotation. So those are spinning on 90. As I said, we could do 180. Let's see how it looks overall with a 180 spin. So these will start from the beginning. Yeah, there's a lot more motion from them. I think more motion is not a good thing. Like it starts getting very visually distracting, which makes me think we should do the opposite. Which is 45. We'll go even less, so there's less motion, and they'll just sort of, we just want them kind of appearing out of nowhere is the vibe that we want. So once again, start scaling them up. And yeah, so there's less rotation, and we can see them all kind of find each other as they close up. So that's cool. Then, what else was I going to say? I mean, we could do some movement. Oh, I was going to do more. I was going to do like a spin on them. Yeah, that might be cool. So, oh, that's a lot of spin. Let's do, we can do 180 because this is just turning on its, like upright axis. So what was I doing? Spherical field, radius, scale up. Yeah, so you get this, like, you see that twisting where they're kind of wrapping themselves up there. Yeah, that's not terrible. So if we were to start laying out a series of these, or, you know, I built that original fractal tree. You see this original fractal kind of tree. I mean, it's not real fractal. It's just a series of branches. But we could continue layering out more and more and more of those. And as long as they are all the proper length, I mean, look how easy it would be to add in another hair. This one is referencing the previous one. Regrow again. And now you see we get, and actually we probably have a lot. Oh, maybe we don't have more. How many? Oh, yeah, I didn't add the segments in. So if I want each of these to have 3, I can say 3. And now this can get a higher number, hit regrow, and now you see there's more there. And they'll keep on growing more and more and more out. And that should automatically have updated the entire rig. So now we go back here, and there'll be even more layers as we slowly spread out from that original center point. And yeah, this stuff just kind of comes out of nowhere. So this might have nothing to do with the way that Simon made his, but you can, I feel like we're getting surprisingly close to the vibe of it, where it's just kind of like, where are these pieces coming from? It's really hard to see where they emerged from as they move in. If we spent more time and put more layers on top of them, that could go, you know, that could go a long way. But multiple branches all kind of reaching in and then clamping in, that's the part of this that I really like. So they can form that final branch. But yeah, that's probably going to be where I have to wrap that one up. I'll give that one a save because it actually worked quite nicely. And we'll say 3A, but I'm going to put underscore recall. I always put an underscore what plugin is in there just so people know. I hesitate to say Fractal, but I can't think of a right name. Save. I'll just see if there's any follow-up on any questions. Jaspal says, okay, yeah, there's a video he has to break down what he did. So it's probably using a different piece of software. I'll check that out in my own time. Most blind. Oh, it looks like a whole conversation is going on. It was done in Houdini, blooming like a flower. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of different things that we could do there. I wonder if we could, how much these hairs could be. Oh, it's only the outer layer, but you can actually bend the hairs. And there's potentially other things we could do with what we did. That's just as far as we go. We can go here. Pro Tools. There's apparently a problem with the Rocket Lasso website right now, and I've got the people that did the website. I let them know that if you go to homepage, every link is dead on the homepage. So we're working on it. But yeah, that's a problem right now. Yeah, most blind in turtle mode. I don't know much about turtle mode. But yeah, turtle mode is the thing where you can do like some fractal type patterns, which would be nice because these were all very chaotic because we only have one option that's random. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of things I could have done a lot. I could have had a lot more control over the pattern that we generated here. But yeah, I'm looking around. Oops, didn't mean to click that. But yeah. Oh yeah, Pro Tools is mentioning the guests, but I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I think next week is Jessica Herrera, who's always doing the awesome dinosaurs and character stuff. And I think that she is guest next week. But yeah, I referenced that same schedule to make sure. So let me do this just so I can make sure I pull up the correct screen. Let me just look at my calendar because that should also have it mentioned. I can say it officially. Yeah, next week is Jess will be guest. So bring your character animation and rigging questions for next week. That'll be the focus. But I do enjoy these. I do enjoy. We have to make sure to do every other week at least is no guest because it is fun just spending more time and tackling the technique and going deeper. It gets challenging when there's a guest to really get in deep and try and do a lot of exploring in a single concept. But thank you so much, everybody. As I mentioned, this is important. I have a Patreon set up. The Patreon just supports these live streams and the tutorials. Of course, all that stuff goes out into the world for free. I'm not making any money from that. And that's what I spend a ton of my time doing while we're working on plugins. As I mentioned, new plugins on the way, but we can't... if you like the stuff, if you like the streams, it's really, really appreciated if people support on Patreon. As mentioned, you get access to all these scene files, but there's also 2 bonus streams every week. I showed those gems. Those are being made during the bonus stream, so you can actually see how I'm making them. And people seem to be really enjoying those modeling bonus streams. But then those gems will also become available on Patreon when they're done. I just think they're really fun. I want to do some modeling. And I'm learning so much about like cutting gems. It's a whole world I knew nothing about. But anyway, that's going to wrap this up. Make sure to tune in next week for the guest, Jess Herrera. That's going to be cool. And I'll see everybody who's on Patreon on the bonus stream tomorrow. And otherwise, that will wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll see you in a week. Bye-bye.